Also, I'm a little out of breath because I was told about the dance-off. I didn't really realize it was going to go that long. I don't know if you noticed, I kept pausing and being like, oh, it's done now. Oh, it's not done, keep going. So other presenters, get ready for that because it's coming. So I'm so happy to be here with all of you today. My intention for the next 30 minutes is to be of service to you, to be useful to you, and maybe build on some of the things Jenny said, maybe populate our collective consciousness with some ideas we can explore in the workshops later today. The Energy Project helps leaders and teams, still catching my breath, no big deal, helps leaders and teams build high-performing cultures. Now, I have not always worked for high-performing cultures. I used to work for a startup that had a very, very intense culture. You'd walk in, rows of desks with computers, multiple screens on every seat, and all day long, all you heard was clack, 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 clack. The clacking of keyboards, but people weren't talking to each other. So perhaps some of you have been in an environment like that. And while I was in this environment, I would work all day, typing all day, and I'd close my computer, bring it home, get home, eat some dinner, open my computer, and type some more. And while I was doing this, I began to feel a slight pain in my right arm. But it wasn't that bad, and as long as I got a good night's sleep, by the next day it would be fine, and it wouldn't start again until the afternoon. So I ignored it. And I kept going, and I kept kind of trying to white knuckle through it and go as hard and as fast as I could. And finally, one day I was typing, and trying to ignore the pain, and all of a sudden I felt this stabbing pain, and I looked down. The whole muscle was frozen, and it wouldn't unclench. And it really hurt, and I looked at it, and I'm poking it, and I reach out my arm to the woman sitting next to me, and I say, Jen, have you seen anything like this? She looks at it, she pokes it, she says, that is not normal. Thank you, Jen. Very helpful. So I left, and I actually left the office, went to a physical therapist. She got it to relax, she put on the goo, and if you've ever been to one, they've got all these good machines, she's icing it. She looks at me and she says, what have you been doing? You have the worst case of tendinitis that I have ever seen. While I was there, I had a pain in the other arm, so I said, can you check out this one? She starts massaging, and she says, you have tendinitis in this arm too, just in the opposing tendon. So how do you cure tendinitis? What's the prescription when you have tendinitis? Where they tell you, yes, rest! I went from trying to do 150% to scaling it way back. I lived in an apartment on the 5th floor. It was a walk-up, 81 steps, not that I ever counted. And I couldn't carry my groceries up the stairs anymore, couldn't carry anything. My physical therapist said if you have a bottle of water, like any of the bottles that are out there, you have to have someone else unscrew it. You can't use that tendon to unscrew bottle. She said if you have to sweep your house, I don't want you to sweep normally, I want you to be like Cinderella and dance with the broom. And so I had to spend a lot of time thinking about, how did I get here? How did I end up in this situation? So how many of you know the parable of the boiling frog? Okay, so what happens, what can you tell us about the boiling frog?
The frog will stay in the water if the water heats up slowly. But if you heat up the water really quickly, it'll jump right out.
Great.
So basically, it'll boil to death if subjected to incremental heat increase.
Perfect, thank you. Did people raise your hand if you didn't hear that? Okay, so mic runners, let's make sure we get mics on folks, and I will repeat that, which is when the water heats up slowly, a frog adapts. A frog gets used to the slowly changing temperature. So 1 degree, not so bad. Little bit more pain in your arm, not so bad, not so bad, not so bad. Eventually, we adapt so much that, like this frog, if the temperature gets really boiling, we might cook without noticing it. And we are all susceptible to this tendency, to being in an environment that's high demand, high stress, where we're ambitious, we're excited about what we're doing, we're driving really hard, and just letting things pile up, letting the temperature go up 1 degree at a time. And in the midst of these environments, we tend to take capacity for granted. We tend to take for granted that there's just always going to be more energy, it's always going to be fine. When this thing happened to me at a startup, I was in my 20s. I was young and healthy, and I thought, well, I'm just going to work like this until the end of the quarter, and then I'll take a couple days off, the arm thing will go away, and it'll all be fine. Well, it's now a chronic injury. I still wear a brace whenever I type, and I haven't had to go back to physical therapy in 5 years, but it's because I manage it really effectively. And many of us, when faced in a really high demand situation, and we have a lot of ambition, we have a lot of hope, and we're working in an environment that's rewarding that and having us strive farther and farther, when there's more to do, we tend to use one very common resource to do more. We tend to throw time at the problem. Let me work longer hours. Let me sleep less. Let me skip lunch. Let me spend less time with my family, less time with my friends. Maybe I won't go to the gym. What's the problem with using time to meet demand? Yes, time is finite. We each have 168 hours, and nothing we do this weekend is going to give any of us 1 second more. There's also no competitive advantage in time. Everyone else is using it. So it just becomes a race to the bottom in terms of how exhausted we can get and how less time we have left for whatever we love. So what I want to introduce is the notion of energy, because energy can be expanded and renewed, which we can't do with time, and we can use energy more efficiently. And by energy, we mean internal human energy. In physics, energy is defined as the capacity to do work. So when we have more energy, we have more capacity, and not just for work, by the way, but for any domain in our life. How great would it be at the end of a workday to have a bunch of energy left over for everything else that needs to happen? Yeah, that would be great, right?
What is that?
What is that?
It's an option. Wow, that's
It is an option. It is an option, and we're going to explore how to make that option possible in just a moment. Because what I want to introduce is that it's not just the number of hours we invest that determines the value we create. It's the energy we bring to whatever hours we work. And this is kind of intuitive, right? If you came to this conference and you didn't sleep at all last night, and you got into a fight with your loved one on the way in, and you're distracted because there's a bunch of emails in your inbox and you've decided to check it every 5 minutes, and you don't know why you're here, although after that introduction by Jenny, it would be very hard not to know why you're here, right? And it would be hard to still be in a bad mood. But let's just say those things were true. If that were the case, it wouldn't really matter that we have the next 25 minutes or so together, because your energy is so depleted in all these other ways. So what do I mean by energy? There are 4 dimensions of human energy, and the first is physical. It's the quantity of energy available to us in our bodies, and there are 4 things that fuel physical energy, and most of us know these. So what are the 4 things that fuel your body? Just yell them out. Rest, food, nutrition, exercise. I'm going to put spiritual in spirit. We're going to get there. Speaking my language. What's the 4th one? I'll give you a clue. Yes, sleep. Okay. Daytime rest and renewal, sleep, exercise, and nutrition. Or movement, we could say, for exercise. Most groups tend not to get daytime rest and renewal. They tend not to yell that one out, so we can tell that we're already at advanced level here. But if you're not doing a lot of that, that could be an area of leverage for you. Emotional refers to the quality of our energy, because we know when we're really ticked off, that can fuel us to get things done. But that feels really different than if we just got a standing ovation in this room. That's a different kind of emotional energy that's fueling us, and changes are actually taking place in our brain that cause the outcomes to be different. We have mental energy, which is the energy of focus. Many people in the groups that I work with report now that this is really under siege, that it's really hard to have a quiet mind or to focus on one thing at a time. And finally, spiritual energy, which in this context we define as the energy of purpose, of living a life aligned with your values. So it could be religion, if religion is very purposeful and meaningful to you, or it could be a number of other things. It could be making great cultures, right? We're all here for that. So we're being fueled spiritually even by attending this conference, I would wager. So we're going to take a test together to see how fueled you are. Now, underneath each of your seat, you'll find a handout, so go ahead and pull that out, and we have volunteers with more if you need them. Okay, so we are going to take an audit to see how energized we are in each dimension. Raise your hand if you still need one. Has everyone got one? All right, great. I'm going to read 20 statements out loud, and I'm going to ask you to mark whether they're true or false. Any questions about that? So here are our statements. Number 1, I get at least 7 hours of sleep. And let me say as we dig in, if this is not true for you, 80% of the time, then you do not get to mark it as true. Maybe you slept 7 hours last night, But if that was a rarity, then this question is not true. So if people sometimes wonder, like, how do I know if it's true? Use about 80% as your benchmark. So I get at least 7 hours of sleep. I'm always conscious of what I eat and how it makes me feel. There's giggling happening. Always being 80%. If there's like, how many hours is Friday night? Is it 10%? I don't know. But yeah, 80%. I do at least 3 aerobic and 2 strength training workouts per week. I take regular breaks during my workday.
Can you define break?
Sure. So a break is when you stop work, and if you are like this, you get up and your body does something else for a little while, but it's not this.
What if your mind is
If your mind is still working, then it may not be a break. So I'm going to let you define break for yourself. If you're asking me, I think you might be onto yourself. I spend enough time fully disconnected from work. Again, enough is at your discretionary definition. This is you. I can't answer this for you, but what does this mean to you? Okay, so you'll have a category score now, 0 to 5. It's just the number of things that were true for you. You can report that on your sheet. Let's move to emotional. I feel enthusiastic when I get to work. When I'm with my loved ones, I am truly with them, present. Again, per your definition. I take enough time outside of work for the activities that I most deeply enjoy. I regularly express my appreciation to others. I stay calm and positive at work even when demand is high. Okay, you can add up your emotional fuel there, 0 to 5. And we'll go to mental. I regularly focus on one thing at a time without getting distracted. 80% plus. So if this is false for you, that's okay. 95% of people who take this audit report this not to be true. So you are not alone. I stick to the key priorities I set. I do the most important task as my first priority of the day. I take time during the day to intentionally quiet my mind. And I set aside time for reflection, big picture thinking each day. So your mental score, 0 to 5. 16, I feel passionately committed to what I do. 17, my decisions at work are often more influenced by my own sense of purpose than by external demands. 18, I successfully balance taking care of myself with looking out for other people. 19, there is a close alignment between what I say is important in my life and how I actually live. And number 20, I invest enough time and energy in making a positive difference in the world. And you get to count this conference as part of it. Okay. So you'll see a space to add up your score on the bottom. It should be 0 to 20. And that reflects how fueled you are. So here's our best guess, but depending on what you scored at how fueled you might be. This is a little small, so I'll read it out loud. If you scored a 17 to 20, you are fully energized. A 13 to 16, moderately energized. 9 to 12, somewhat energized. 5 to 8, fading. And 0 to 4, burned out. By category, by each energy dimension, because you may have scored differently, if you got a 5, you're fully energized in that type of energy. A 4, moderate. A 3, somewhat. 2 is fading, and 0 or 1, you're burned out in that dimension. So let's just get a sense of what's in the room. How many people scored a 0 to 4? Okay. So you can see wherever you are, you're not alone. What about a 5 to 8? Okay. What about 9 to 12? And 13 to 16? And 17 to 20? All right, you all can leave the talk. You can just go. And just to get a sense of where we are by dimension, and you can raise your hand twice if you circled the most in 2. Who circled the most in physical? Or not circled the most. For whom were the most questions true? What'd you say true the most to? Who had the most true in physical? Most fueled in physical? Okay, who's the most fueled emotionally? Ooh, that's a big one here. What about mentally? Okay, very few of us are very fueled mentally. And what about spiritually? Okay, so we can see the room center of gravity is really around emotion and spirit, purpose, and high positive emotion in this room, in our cohort here. Okay, what I'm gonna ask you to do is look at these 2 questions. Which behaviors most energize you? So this could be things that I just listed, those 20, or it could be things that are occurring to you now. What most energizes you? And what could you be doing to fuel yourself more effectively? What most energizes you, and what could you be doing to fuel yourself more effectively? I'm going to ask you to find a partner and take a few minutes to discuss this. About a couple minutes per person. I'll check in with you in a few minutes. Any questions about that? Okay, please dig in. And the questions, do you want me to repeat them? Yes. Which behaviors most energize you? Which behaviors most energize you? What are you doing now that really energizes you? And what could you be doing to fuel yourself more effectively? So if there was something I read where you were like, man, I wish that were true for me, but it's not, that could be something to look at. So what could you be doing to fuel yourself more effectively? Okay. Any other questions? All right, let's discuss with a partner for a few minutes, and then we'll check in and hear from the group what you came up with. Fab. Okay. So what did you discuss? What came out in your partner conversations? Let's hear from a couple of people. We've got someone right here.
Hi, my name's Constance.
Hi, Constance.
I just listened this time, but we discussed the fact that this person does something that they love, but maybe they need to renegotiate the terms of the relationship with their job. It could be maybe have a separation or a divorce, or maybe just define new boundaries in terms of engagement with their work.
Great. So if I'm picking up what you're putting down, loving what you do, being so engaged, but maybe in a way that can be depleting in ways, so boundaries need to be put in place. Okay. How many people can relate to that? Yeah. Okay, let's hear from someone else. Are you going? Okay.
Hi, Megan Eddings. We discussed being excited about your team or your project and that kind of taking away from your personal time, whether it be physical or taking breaks and like getting that really like mental reboot that I think a lot of us put off when we're dealing with teams or other people and trying to keep that composure. But that was a big one with strength in emotional and spiritual, and then weaknesses in the physical or mental side. So
Great. Thank you for that. Yeah, going so hard on the things you're passionate about that some other things get a little neglected. And one more here.
Hey, my name's Craig Saloner. What I love to do is I love to play with my friends. I really do. I love to hang out. I love to collaborate. I love to create environments where we can be our best. And when I'm not doing that, it's when I'm trying to do this thing all on my own, it drains me. And so creating some focus around how you do that and stay in that environment.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's great to know what environment is feeling to you. Okay, one more here. We'll just get a last one here.
Hi, my name's John. I surfed for the first 20 years of my life. Then I decided I attached more meaning to career, work stuff. And now, 20 years after that, I've realized that surfing's really important as any title I've ever held. And I will still show up on time to work. It doesn't mean because I surf I'm not going to be there. And isn't it weird how you attach meanings and stuff? And I wrote it down. I'm not surfing enough. So I'm going to go.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. Great awareness, John. Really appreciate that. So all of the things that you reported to be true represent behaviors where you're intentionally fueling yourself. What at the Energy Project we would call renewal behaviors that renew your energy. And that actually correspond with human biology. Because humans aren't designed to operate like computers, running at high speeds, continuously, for long periods of time with multiple programs. And in fact, all of my IT peeps know even computers aren't designed to operate like this. Even computers need to be powered down periodically. Every system in our body is designed to pulse between spending energy and recovering it. So just yell them out. What are some systems in our body that pulse? Our heart, yeah. Our brain moves from high-frequency electrical activity to low-frequency electrical activity in periodic cycles, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Our breath, yeah. Our respiration. What else? Vocal cords, what? Our adrenals. Our nerve endings, our attention wavers in and out. Our digestion, what's that? Our muscles, yeah. They contract, or they contract in the face of stress, and then they relax. Or when there's chronic stress, like my tendinitis, they don't relax enough, and then we get injury. And in fact, the research shows that we're meant to really move in this pulse throughout the day. Nathaniel Kleitman is the researcher who discovered the varying stages of sleep in the 1950s. And he continued doing research, and in the 60s, he discovered that we actually move through varying levels of alertness during the day the exact same way we do at night when we're asleep. And roughly every 90 to 120 minutes, we move through this cycle and we hit an energy bottom. And he called this the ultradian rhythm. It's a 90-minute wave that we're designed to cycle through. And you actually don't need research to tell you this, right? How many of you have been in the meeting that didn't end? Yeah, what happens in the meeting that didn't end? Yeah, you can't focus, maybe you get restless, you can't concentrate. Some people get hangry, so hungry you're angry. We notice that we stop being able to perform at a certain point, yet we try to push ourselves through. When really the key to high performance, to perform at our best, we have to balance spending energy on the job with renewing it periodically. And there are strategic ways of doing that, like using the 90 to 120-minute interval. The problem is most of us aren't being strategic about it. Instead, we're doing this. I try to keep my coffee buzz going till the martini buzz kicks in. So my task with you today is to try to ennoble renewal. What do I mean by ennoble? I mean to bring the nobility or honor back to something, to bring the value back to something, because culturally we've tended to see sleep or rest as, oh, that's for people who can't hack it. They're not working hard enough. But actually it's a critical component of staying engaged, not burning out, not getting tendinitis. And in fact, it's a critical component of being able to lead our people effectively. When I got tendinitis, my leader was someone who really believed in command and control, who believed in FaceTime, who believed in ass and seat, how many hours were you there? Now, some people are thinking that doesn't sound like a startup, but we know that unfortunately that mentality is also present in startups and maybe more present than we would wish it is. And he would brag that he hadn't taken a sick day in 7 years. 7 years, because our being burned out and our hard work and our adrenal fatigue and our injuries are badges of honor, right? But on the other hand, he also described how his hair was falling out in patches mysteriously. And he never made the connection. And one day he called me into his office, and our startup had grown from about 12 people to about 100 people in a year. So you all know what happens when a startup grows quickly, right? Culture changes really fast, and all of a sudden not everyone knows each other, and it's a big confusing place. And so I was doing these monthly lunch and learns where people would get to know each other, someone from a department would speak, there'd be interviews. I was really trying to keep us close-knit and family style. He calls me into his office, and he's continually stressed out. His hair's falling out, he is not renewing. And he says to me, Arden, I think this lunch thing you're doing is a distraction. And I think you should stop. And I walked out of that meeting, did some back-of-the-envelope math. It was 0.5% of the time I spent at work. And it was about 50% of the meaning I was deriving at that point. So with that, he just wiped out a lot of what fueled me in that job. And I felt really devalued. I did not feel cared for by my leader, because he'd just taken away this thing that was so precious to me. And what he violated was a fundamental tenet of what we need to be looking at as leaders, which is nothing matters more to us at work than the feeling that our bosses genuinely value and care about us as people. Nothing. The science and the studies again and again support this. More than money, more than acclaim, we want to know that we're valued as people, particularly by leaders who are more influential on us than our peers and than people who report to us. The Energy Project did a study in 2013 of 19,000 workers worldwide. in partnership with Harvard Business Review. And we found that employees who feel recognized, respected, and appreciated by leaders, are more than twice as likely to stay in the organization. No other behavior that we looked at had a more powerful impact on well-being and retention than feeling respected by your leader. Lionel Tiger is an anthropologist who studies baboons. Isn't that a great name? His name is Lionel Tiger, and he studies baboons. It's like the whole animal, and I'm wearing a zebra shirt, so we've got like Animal Planet here on stage. And what he found, baboons have a 98% genetic similarity to humans. And here's what he found. The average member in a troop looks at the alpha baboon every 20 to 30 seconds. They turn their head and they glance 3 times a minute. Why are they doing that? What's that? Approval. And what'd you say?
Am I safe? Am I okay?
Safety, yes. Am I safe? Am I okay? So there may have been a moment in your career where you realized how incredibly influential you were over your reports, that they're watching you all the time. I asked a group of leaders this a few months ago, and they were high level in a global multinational organization, so really senior leaders with ginormous teams. And one of them said, a couple years ago, I was put in charge of a country in Eastern Europe, and he went and was country president there. And he said, never in my career have I worn a tie. It's just not my thing. I don't wear ties. In my country, we don't wear ties. But when I got there, all the men in this office in Eastern Europe wore ties. And I just didn't think it was necessary, so I didn't wear a tie. He never said a word about ties. He never spoke about ties. Within a month, no one was wearing a tie because they are watching us. I feel like that movie Congo, they're watching you. But they are. Our reports are taking our cues from us, and if we're not creating safety for them, it's not working. So the question is, how are you creating safety for your team? And are you fueled enough to be doing it effectively? Because if you're not fueled, you're not going to be able to think straight and to be the kind of leader who's creating this psychological safety for your people. And I looked in the agenda. I think Ashanti's doing a workshop on this afternoon. So if you're interested in psychological safety, there are chances to go deeper. So after that manager called me into his office and told me he didn't want me doing the lunch and learns anymore, I went home and I was really angry. And I was like, I've got to get out of there. It's got to the point where I don't want to stay there anymore. And I looked around my apartment and I said, if I could work anywhere, where would I work? And I saw this book on my bookshelf that I'd been assigned as part of my coaching program, and it was called The Way We're Working Isn't Working. It's by the Energy Project's CEO, Tony Schwartz. And I took it down, and it really espouses this idea that great leadership is not about getting more out of people, it's about investing more in them so they can bring their best. And I said, I want to go try to work with that guy. That's the message I want to spread. So that's what brought me here today. So I want to ask, are you with me on investing more in people? Yes. I can't hear you. Are you with me on investing more in people? Yes! Yes! Okay, let's go do this together. Thank you.